It's the same thing that I have cleared earlier, that it loads resources, displays boot menu. After the user selects a specific entry, the BLG image load PE image function is used to load the next exe. It matches a digital signature. From this point onwards, Microsoft has a digital signature policy. If your driver is not signed by the digital signature, they will not execute it. However, since these files are provided by Microsoft itself, they are signed by Microsoft itself. So now boot manager loads will load, vBootkit patches will load. It's just the next stage. So we patch from one stage to the next stage until we get to the kernel. So winload completely tests bootmanager.exe that I have been provided a safe environment. There is no way to verify a safe environment if you don't have a baseline. Since there is no baseline before the x86 boot manager, so earlier boot manager used to say, okay, this is safe environment, but then we patched that protection. Trusted base. Not only a baseline, a trusted baseline. So now boot manager loads up, it maps the registry, loads boot drivers, loader blocks, and the remaining things. It also passes a famous option which is used to enable, say, debugger. You want to disable some policies such as ASLR, data execution policy, page guard, how the debugger should function, say serial port or USB port and something. So we just hook everything here and we hack the kernel. This is the only place that we hook in the kernel. Start first user process. This function does is gains control when you are starting the first user mode process. So let's say everything passed successfully and the kernel has executed our code. So kernel cannot continue until we fix what we have patched. But we also need to be in control. So what we do is we allocate ourselves new chunk of memory, relocate ourselves to that place, fix the original kernel, create ourselves new thread, and then let the execution continue as it was. So where you are seeing a smiley is where we have a control in the boot process. We have control in the MBR, the bootmanager.exe, the winload, and of course the kernel. So these are the differences between vBootkit 2.0 and 2.0a. As you can see, it's the architectural difference. It was for the 64-bit, it's for the 32-bit. It was written earlier in x86 assembly code only. However, the current generation of vBootkit has moved over to C code. Now we can write whatever we want in C code without vBootkit having any trouble to load it up. You take a piece of code, compile it with any standard compiler, and vBootkit will run it. vBootkit 2.0 was very small, just 3 kilobytes of code. However, in the current generation, since we are using a executable, it has grown a little bit, around 8 kilobytes. Yes?
This will give us the exe file in 2.0, like in 2.0 you are having assembly code and you compile it and you are using it in a separate CD. In 2.0a, we are only using C code or using assembly also?
We are using assembly. Assembly is used to load the C part.
Assembly, okay, that's true.
Let's say you have an exe. Exe just doesn't run out of the box. You have to fix the relocations if you have moved to different locations, solve any dependencies if it's a use the 32 message box or something. So you have to do all that task. All that critical tasks are now done by the assembly, and the remaining payloads and everything runs in C mode. So these are the payloads that we will be discussing today. The remote command and control. We use a very simple protocol to communicate. Let's say a system is infected with a vBootkit. Now you want to control it. So we have a remote command and control built into this 8 kilobytes of code. It's done over ping packets. It's based on a request response protocol, just like HTTP. You make a call, at the next response you will receive what was the output of the previous call. We don't maintain any state as such. So this is the remote command and control protocol. Command bytes, response code byte. You make it any ping packets. If you have these bytes, vBootkit will take action depending on the command byte or the response byte. We also have signatures there, so as you don't consider any ping packet as it mentions for the vBootkit. So we have a signature in place. This is how the control flows in the remote command and control. As my friend pointed out, firewall is useless in this case. None of the firewalls which block pings are going to stop these packets. Okay, how many do you know how a network interface card receives packets? Not a single one? Okay, let me put it. When a packet arrives on the network card fires an interrupt, which is handled by the anti-kernel, interrupt dispatcher. What interrupt dispatcher does is, it will take the IDT table, interrupt descriptor table, find a suitable entry. Okay, this interrupt has to be handled by this function. Now what it will do is, it will fetch the ping packet from the network card. It's a hardware. So packet has to be fetched from the network card, and then all the firewalls come into picture. Firewalls come into picture a lot later. Then most of the things have already been done. So firewalls are not going to protect you against this attack. So now we are going to talk about privilege escalation. Yes? We are not specific to Windows. I will just show you a demonstration for Linux too, if you are interested. It is not a Windows specific thing. It's a x86 design failure. It was never designed for the security reasons. However, they are trying to design a new completely framework based on the EFI generation, which is supposed to be handle this kind of problems. Until those problems are held at the design level, you are not secure from these kind of attacks. I think so. Here you can see that we are using a CD DVD with a 7-bootkit.iso CD-ROM. So now we will just power on this. Here you will see EEE, and then the OS continues as it is. Now we choose our own entry and let the OS boot up.